FAIRtax is coming, don't stand in the way. FAIRtax is coming across the USA. FAIRtax is coming, clean up this mess. We got to get rid of the IRS. Hey, hey! Hey, hey!
Hello and welcome once again to FAIRtax Power Radio. I'm Bob Paxton.
And I'm Ron Malero.
And we are
the FAIRtax Guys.
And we are on a mission to open your eyes to the fact that you, in all probability, are a FAIRtax fan, even if you don't know it.
And we can prove it.
Yes, we will. Before we get into that, though, let's go ahead, Ron, give our contact information. If people want to send us a comment or a question, how can they reach us?
You can email us at thefairtaxguys@gmail.com. Very simple, thefairtaxguys@gmail.com. Please, if you have any requests, you need something you want us to go over again, or you have a question on something, just send it along, and we would be glad to respond to it. We're here to answer questions and make clear what the fair tax is, what it'll do for our country, what it'll do for you.
And we're on Facebook now.
Yeah, that's right. If you go to Facebook, look for the FAIRtax Guys, and you'll see our smiling faces there, and all the information about this program, the Leading Edge Radio Network, and anything else that comes up. So please go to Facebook, like our page, and learn more about it. And again, you can respond to us there too on Facebook. That's what it's there for.
All righty, well, let's get right to it.
Okay.
One of the things that we love to see as we go around teaching people about the fair tax is watching them turn the light bulb on, and people who really are not well informed about the fair tax, who may have heard it but don't know what it is, we explain not so much the nuts and bolts of how it works, but just what it's going to do for people. And 99.98% of the people that we talk to turns out and says, I like that. So we got a lot of people we know are fair tax fans that don't know it yet.
That's right.
So we are going to give you a test here. Pay attention and to see if you are a FAIRtax fan. All right. Now, we have again borrowed this from Jeff Foxworthy. But if you would like to have more money in your pocket by eliminating federal withholding from your paycheck or retirement distribution, you might be a FAIRtax fan. If you believe feeding your family is a higher priority than feeding the government, you might be a FAIRtax fan. If you'd like to exterminate the Internal Revenue Service from the face of the earth forever, you might be a FAIRtax fan. If you'd like to keep government's fat nose out of your personal financial business, you might be a FAIRtax fan. If you would like to be in control of how much and when you pay your federal taxes, you might be a FAIRtax fan. If you'd like to save and invest totally free of federal taxation, you might be a FAIRtax fan. And if you believe everyone should pay their fair share with no loopholes, no exemptions, no deductions for well-heeled special interests, you might be a FAIRtax fan. And here's the biggie. If you'd like to receive a prebate check every month, you might be a FAIRtax fan. But Ron, before we go on to the other items on the list here, let's revisit. We spoke in fairly good detail last time about the prebate. But it is the heart and soul of the fair tax. It's kind of a new word. A lot of people don't know what it is. You won't find that in your Funkin' Wagnalls. So people, you say prebate, and they say, what's that? You know.
Yep.
And it's also the part of the fair tax that people who have a vested interest in keeping the status quo and are trying to propagandize against the fair, they won't tell you about that. Yeah. They won't. All they'll say is that those fair tax folks want to put this huge sales tax on everything you buy, and that's all they say. They won't tell you that it replaces the income tax, and they certainly don't tell you about the prebate.
And this does happen. You mentioned it in the last program. You'd be talking about somebody who believes that they know something about the fair tax. They've considered themselves somewhat of an expert, and then you ask them, well, what do you think about the prebate? And you get that blank stare, which tells you immediately they really haven't done their homework, okay? Not many people try to criticize the fair tax, and actually it's very difficult to do if you're going to be truthful and honest. But as Bob said, the prebate is the heart and soul of the fair tax. It is what makes the fair tax fair. Now, the fair tax, again, is going to be a consumption tax or a sales tax. All the income tax, every vestige of the income tax will go away. The IRS will go away because they will have nothing to do since all of their rules and regulations will be rescinded. And instead of being taxed on how hard you work, you're going to be taxed on what you choose to spend, and it will be your choice. So everybody, every resident in this country, even visitors, when they go to the store and buy items, new products, and pay for services, they're going to pay the fair tax. But at the same time, we don't want to make the fair tax regressive. Now, regressive is a term that very often applies to sales taxes. And sales taxes by themselves do have a reputation or history of being regressive, which means they have a bigger impact on the lower income people. All right. If your state has a 5% sales tax, that's going to be a bigger deal for people who are just making it than people who earn and spend, say, a couple $100,000 a year. The sales tax is not going to be a big deal for them, but for people who are just getting by, just providing a subsistence existence for their family, sales tax is a big deal. The Americans of Fair Taxation recognized this back in the 90s when they first came up with the fair tax, and we got to do something about this. So they came up with the idea of the prebate. Now here's what it is. On the one hand, we said that everybody is going to pay the fair tax on every new product and every service.
That's how you keep it simple.
That's right. And we don't want people, however, to have to pay the fair tax on what it costs to stay alive. Now, how are we going to resolve these two? It might seem that those two oppose each other, but there's a very simple way of handling this. Very simple way that cannot be altered. All right. We know from the Health and Human Services, they put out tables on what it takes money-wise to maintain a family. We're going to use a family of 4, mom and dad and 2 kids. That's a rather typical family. And according to Health and Human Services, it requires about $31,000, according to this table that I'm looking at, $31,020 to maintain a family of 4. That's food, clothing, shelter, the basic necessities of life. All right. Now, let's say the fair tax has gone away. The income tax has gone away. HR 25 is now the law of the land. No more income tax. We pay the tax when we pay for stuff. When you go to the store and you buy something, it's going to have the fair tax that you paid listed on there. We don't want people to have to pay the fair tax on what it costs to stay alive. So we're going to reimburse it to them. All right, that's the easiest way to do it. Bob and I mentioned the last time, well, we could have a grocery store that's split in two, with fair tax side and the non-fair tax side. But that's crazy.
No, you don't want to get in the business of making exemptions and loopholes, and this is subject to the tax and this isn't, because again, that just opens everything back up for K Street folks, the lobbyists in Washington, to come flooding in with wads of campaign cash wanting favorable tax treatment for their clients. That's what we've got now, and that's what the fair tax must and will get rid of.
That's right. And we also don't want to have something like, this family is at or below the poverty level, so they're going to get this special card which exempts them. Now, that is prone to fraud, and it's just another administrative cost that we just don't need. There is a much simpler way to do it. Okay, so let's go back to this family of 4. It takes $31,020 according to the U.S. Health and Human Services Department. So we know that if everything they earn goes to, the subsistence, food, clothing, and shelter and so forth, basic medical care, that in spending their $31,000 a year, that about $7,100, actually $7,135 is going towards the fair tax, because everything they're paying for will include in it the 23% sales tax. So we're going to take that $7,135 that they're paying annually for the fair tax on the basic necessities, and we're going to rebate it to them in monthly increments at the beginning of the month. So when you take that, again, a family of 4, mom and dad and 2 kids, they will get a prebate. That's the nickname that's been given it to it because it's a rebate that shows up at the beginning of the month. This rebate will be $595. Now, we're into 2015. We're going to have new figures. Probably those figures will increase a little bit, but this serves as an example. So that family of 4, and every family of 4, and I don't care if it's a family of 4 that's just getting by, or a millionaire family of 4, a mom and dad and 2 kids that have, almost boundless income. It's a family of 4. They will get $595 as a prebate for each month. That can go in. That can be automatically added to your savings account, put on your debit card, whatever. It'll probably be done electronically. But that's what the prebate does. The prebate makes sure that you're not going to pay, or you're going to at least be reimbursed for the fair tax on the basic necessities of life. And for those people that think it's an entitlement, it is not an entitlement. No more than the standard deduction is an entitlement in the current income tax law. Everybody, when you fill out your 1040, you're dealing with the standard deduction, okay? This is kind of the same concept.
Yeah, and I was trying to think the other day, how do we relate this to people? People think that the prebate is just totally, unique to the fair tax. Nobody else has it. But there really is something in the current tax system that everybody is familiar with that we can relate this to. And, of course, that's the tax refund that you get once a year from the Internal Revenue Service. Now, what that happens, a lot of people mistakenly think, well, the tax refund is the government giving me money.
Yeah, that comment, I don't pay taxes, I get a refund.
The government is giving back to you your own money that they collected from you for taxes that you ended up not owing.
Yes.
So that's the difference. But if you think about the prebate, that is actually a tax refund of taxes that you paid that you don't owe, because under the fair tax, nobody, as you said, owes a dime of federal taxes until they've taken care of their own basic necessities. If they've spent the $31,000 family of 4, they don't owe a dime of fair tax until their spending rises above that level. But since they are going to be taxed on every purchase they make, they are in effect paying taxes that they don't owe. But now, instead of getting a tax rebate, some people getting a tax rebate once a year, everybody gets a tax refund once a month. And it's the same thing. They're just giving back to you what was collected from you that you don't owe.
Well, not quite everybody, right, Bob?
Well, you have to be a legal resident of the United States.
Yeah, there is that little catch right there, all right? You have to be a legal resident, all right? Because we want people that are in the country legally, legal residents who are gainfully employed. We want them to be successful, all right? My family were immigrants to this country almost 100 years ago. Kind of hard to believe. And, we certainly have nothing against legal immigrants. So all legal residents are going to get the prebate. And if you're, again, right now under the current system, if you get a refund at the end of the year, you just made Uncle Sam a non-interest-free or free interest-free loan. You gave them the money to hang on to, and you got no interest for it. All right. The prebate is going to be given to you at the beginning of each month. It's a much better deal.
So I guess we can kind of change this a little around. It says if you'd like to get a tax refund every month instead of maybe once a year, you might be a FAIRtax fan. That's what the prebate's all about. It is a tax refund that you get every month, because it's giving money back to you that was collected from you that you don't owe. Okay, let's go on, Ron. We've got a couple other things that the fair tax will do for people, and this is a biggie. I know we've had a lot of people talking about, the recovery and where the jobs. And the deal is, if you would love to see millions of jobs created in the United States and a lot of these outsourced jobs come back home, you might be a FAIRtax fan. How does that happen?
All right. Right now, for small businesses, tax compliance costs are usually much higher than the actual tax itself. For a small business,
Okay,
I saw a
tax
study.
compliance costs. That's money that a business owner or even an individual has to spend just in order to comply with the tax code. That's what you have to pay your accountant. That's what you have to, the value of your time and energy keeping all your records. That's what it costs you to buy TurboTax or something similar to put on your computer. All the money you have to spend to comply with the tax code over and above the tax liability is what we mean by compliance costs.
That's right. And it's usually a pretty hefty sum. I mean, the smaller the company, the smaller it is. But on average, the compliance costs are $724 for every 100 of taxes they owe. I mean, that's wildly inefficient. Now, think of that. 7 times more to comply with the tax code than it costs to actually pay the tax. And like Bob said, that's for accountants, bookkeeping fees, software, the hardware you need, the computer hardware for larger companies, the clerical help they have to hire.
And the value of your time doing all that stuff.
Yeah. I mean, for the very large companies, they have to have CPAs and tax attorneys. They probably have a whole division, So whether it's a very small company, 2 people like my wife and I a few years ago, or U.S. Steel, or GE, or whatever, tax compliance costs are enormous. And under the fair tax, well, one of the aspects of the fair tax is that business-to-business purchases are not subject to the fair tax. Now, some people are going to jump up and down and say, oh, the businesses need to pay their fair share. Well, let's debunk that myth right here, okay? If a business has to spend more on their raw materials, their labor, or their taxes, who pays for it? We do, the consumer. You and I, not just Bob and I, but everybody listening, all right?
So the tax liability plus the compliance costs is in effect just another cost of doing business. It gets passed on to consumers in the form of higher prices. It gets passed on to stockholders in the lower dividends. They can't pay as much dividend if they have to pay all this stuff to Uncle Sam. And of course, the employees can sometimes or always will get, fewer benefits, lower salaries, because again, every cost that deducts from that bottom line is $1 that you can't give in dividends, that you can't give in employee benefits, and that you can't pass on to your customers in the form of lower prices. It hits everyone. Even though Uncle Sam gets the check, the business has to write the check to Uncle Sam. It is the individuals that do business with or work for or invest in that business that ultimately ends up paying the tax.
That's right. That's right. And you have to think about what it takes to run a business. Now, many people listening are in business, and you already know. But a lot of my friends are in education. That was my background. And they really don't have much of a concept of what it takes to run a business. But when you stop and think about it, when you do some reading, any increased expense is borne by the consumer, not the business. They pass those expenses on in the form of higher prices, as Bob said, lower dividends to their stockholders, or cuts in employees. All right? And sometimes, if the tax code is out of control, people lose their jobs. That's not what we want here. So compliance costs are actually, in many cases, worse than the tax itself. And getting back to the fair tax in businesses, business-to-business purchases under the fair tax will not be subject to the fair tax. If you're running a business and you need to buy a new computer system because your old one just bit the dust, if you need to buy a new desk, if your business needs a pickup truck, you will not pay the fair tax on that item if it's to be used for business. Now, again, that's so that these costs don't get rolled in. Right now, everything that we purchase in this country, everything, every product, every new product, every service, has an embedded cost of about 22% due to the tax code. You take a look, you look at a new car. You got to form steel. You got to dig the iron ore out of the ground. You got to make steel. You got to make all the other parts, the plastics and so forth, the carbide fiber. All those things require people to mine the iron ore, people to refine it, people to make it into steel, people to shape it into fenders and so forth. All those people pay taxes, and all their companies pay taxes. It gets rolled into the cost of the product. It goes on to the next up the chain. And the car manufacturers, when they're all said and done, all those taxes that are rolled into every aspect of making that car are paid for by the final consumer. The companies don't have a closet full of cash, and when Uncle Sam ups the tax bill, they just open up the closet and shovel out a bit more. No, it doesn't run like that. If a company cannot make a profit, they go out of business, and everybody loses their job. So when increases occur within a company, it is you and I, the consumer, that pays for it. So please don't be fooled by this, oh, companies have to pay taxes. Under the fair tax, business-to-business purchases will not be subject to the fair tax, okay? That prevents this rolling effect of embedded costs, and that's what's going to keep our products, well, under the fair tax, products are going to cost a lot less.
Mm-hmm. And you've heard about the term corporate inversions. That's when an American company will either buy or merge with a foreign company and then move operations to the foreign country because you get a better tax treatment there. So the fact that the United States has, I think, either the highest or the second highest corporate income tax in the world, that is what is driving a lot of our businesses, and with those, a lot of our jobs offshore. You take all that stuff away, the corporate income tax rate is zero under the fair tax. Everybody's income tax rate is zero under the fair tax. With the fair tax, the United States becomes the most business-friendly place on the planet to do business. And we heard Neil Bortz one time talking about a survey of, I think about 500 CEOs, CFOs of major international corporations, and they were asked what would be their reaction if the fair tax were passed and there were no more corporate income taxes in the United States. 60% of them said they would build their next plant or their next distribution center or whatnot in the United States, i.e. they would bring a lot of jobs over here. The remaining 40% said they'd move the whole company here.
Yep.
So you're talking about a tremendous, absolutely tremendous job stimulus thing. The fair tax, you don't normally think of it as a jobs bill, but unintended or maybe intended consequences of making the United States the most business-friendly place on the planet.
As one of our fair tax volunteers says, you would have to chain yourself to your bed to keep from getting a job in this country. All right.
Yeah, and we mentioned business earlier. We're going to be talking later on the program to a business owner, and we're going to get his firsthand perspective on what the fair tax would mean for him and for his business. But we got to move along here a little bit, Ron. We got one more little point we have to cover to make people realize that they are the fair tax fans, and that is if you'd like to put the tax code beyond the reach of all the lobbyists and all the special interests and all the campaign cash money, you might be a fair tax fan. What have we got now, and why do we need to change it?
Well, there are so many loopholes and exemptions and so forth. A couple of months ago, we got an email from our director of the state director of the fair tax here in Florida, and it listed the tax extenders, those tax funding bills that are renewed each year. This is a list of such tax extenders and examples of why K Street lobbyists have such influence over tax policy. Now, I've got a list single-spaced 2 pages long. Obviously, I'm not going to read all those, but I went down through it and I got a couple of notable ones. And we're going to try to figure out just what these are. The first one, American Samoa Economic Development Credit.
What?
Okay. The American Samoa Economic Development Credit. That is some kind of a tax
You're
credit
kidding.
that was fought for by the K Street lobbyists. K Street, another name for K Street, Gucci Gulch, all right, where these people make 6- and 7-figure salaries tweaking the tax code for something like the American Samoa Economic Development Credit. And then there's one down here, election to accelerate AMT and R&E credits in lieu of bonus depreciation. If anybody knows what that means, please go ahead and email us because I haven't a clue. I like this one, Indian coal production credit. Now, not just normal coal production credit, but Indian coal
Now,
production
is that
credit.
the country of India, or are folks on the Indian lands here in this country? Who
And again,
knows?
I haven't a clue. Indian coal production credit.
Somebody on K Street thought that they bought that for somebody.
Yep. It had to be in there. And because it's a credit, whoever is taking advantage of that is paying less taxes, which guess what? Means the rest of us pay more taxes. And then there's the last one here that I highlighted, new markets tax credit. That's a good one too. And again, since I'm a retired science teacher, I really don't know what the heck that means. All these tax credits, loopholes, exemptions, all right, they are put in there by K Street lobbyists who lobby our Congress critters and get all these special things in there. Under the fair tax, that goes away.
Yeah, we the people are not paying attention to how much the tax code is actually being manipulated. Like over the past 10, 11 years, there's been an average of more than one change per day for 11 years straight. That's insane.
It's a little nuts, all right? We really need to make things simpler. The tax code right now, people we're getting on towards tax time, and people are gearing up. They're buying software. They're finishing up their books, giving it to their accountants and so forth. And you know what, folks? Individuals under the fair tax will never have to file a tax return again. Imagine that. No tax returns. No filing of tax returns. No record keeping for tax purposes. That's for individuals. And for businesses, the record keeping is going to be reduced about 80 or 90%. All right. What are they going to do with all that money they save because their record keeping is reduced all that much? Well, they're probably going to take a look at maybe expanding their business. Now, I had somebody in my house a few months ago doing some work, actually a couple of years ago, doing some work. And they said, things for our company, we're going pretty well. I could hire another team, but if I do, I'm going to go over that magic figure of 50, and I'm not going to be able, and it's going to put me in another world of hurt. So I'm not going to. I'm not going to expand my business because of the tax code. Think of that. I'm not going to expand my business because of the tax code. This is crazy, folks. We need to stop beating ourselves over the head and get something going with the fair tax.
Amen. That we do. And unfortunately, something else we have to do now is wrap up this edition of FAIRtax Power Radio. So thank you so much for being with us today. Hopefully you're out there kind of nodding your head by now going, you know what? I really like the idea of bringing home the full gross amount of my paycheck with no federal withholding, no federal payroll taxes taken out of it. I really like the idea that feeding my family is a higher priority than feeding the government. I really like the idea of hanging a going out of business sign on the front door of the Internal Revenue Service. I really like the idea of being able to save and invest totally free of federal taxation. And I really like the idea of having a fair, simple, easy tax code that treats everyone the same, no exemptions, no loopholes, no special deductions for special interests, but also one under which everyone pays their fair share. And I really, really like the idea of getting a tax refund every month instead of maybe getting one once a year. And again, that's the FAIRtax prebate based on household size. And just for a quick idea of what we're dealing with here, under the current figures, a family of 4, if the fair tax were the law of the land right today, a family of 4 with 2 adults, 2 children would be getting a prebate check every month for right around $600. And if you like that idea, congratulations, you're a FAIRtax fan. 2 things you need to do at this point. You need to contact your congressmen and senators, let them know that you want the fair tax, and also you need to join the Americans for Fair Taxation, AFFT. That's www.fairtax.org. You can go to the website. There's a little join link up at the upper right of the page, and you can join for as little as $5 a year. Now, if you can do more, we'd appreciate that, but we need your membership worse than we need your money. So go to fairtax.org. Be sure to join AFFT, or if you like, you can text the word member, MEMBER, to 68398. Again, that's text member to 68398 to join Americans for Fair Taxation. And we sure would appreciate that. Thanks again for listening to FAIRtax Power Radio. Until next time, for Ron Malero, I'm Bob Paxton, saying the fair tax, once you understand it, you'll demand it.
Fair tax is coming. Don't stand